There's a moment when the noise of the world fades, and what remains isn't peace. It's shame. Not shame because you did something terribly wrong. Not shame because you hurt someone. But shame because you did nothing at all. You watched yourself make promises, watched yourself declare your intentions, and then watched yourself break them, again and again. Stay with me, because by the time we're finished, you'll see why Carl Jung believed your lack of discipline has never been about laziness. It's not weakness. It's exile. A part of you was pushed out of sight a long time ago, and now it is crying out to come home. Think about it. No one talks about what it does to the human spirit to watch yourself betray the same vow every single day. You tell yourself, tomorrow. You whisper, this time it'll be different. But deep down, you already know that tomorrow never comes. And then there's the mirror. You walk past it and feel a strange resentment. Not because you hate yourself, but because you no longer believe yourself. You've said I'll change 100 times. You've whispered this is it and even believed it for a fleeting hour or two. But morning arrives, and the man who made the vow is gone, replaced by the same tired reflection scrolling, running, hiding once more. Carl Jung once wrote, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. What if your avoidance of discipline isn't just procrastination? What if it's something far deeper? Something closer to a rejection of your own future self? That's where we begin. Who you are versus who you've rehearsed. Let me ask you, what if the version of you who is tired, distracted, unfocused, what if that isn't who you really are? What if that's just the character you've rehearsed into existence? You see, you've been trained to believe that discipline is about effort, about straining harder, grinding longer, pushing yourself beyond your limits. But that's not true. Discipline isn't effort. Discipline is identity. And until you stop identifying yourself as someone who needs to become disciplined, you'll remain trapped in a battle you can't win. It sounds strange, I know. But listen carefully. Once you grasp this truth, the war you've been fighting every morning will finally make sense. Carl Jung believed most people never truly become who they are. It's not because they don't try. It's because they remain strangers to their own potential. They chase external changes. New jobs, new environments, new apps, new productivity hacks, new motivational videos. They keep looking outward for something that was meant to be found inward. The truth is, you don't need more. You need less. Less running, less hiding, less numbing yourself with distraction. And above all, less avoidance of the one thing you've always feared most, responsibility. I don't mean responsibility to your boss, your parents, or your partner. I mean responsibility to yourself, to the person you were meant to become. Discipline isn't about checklists or alarms at 5 a.m. Discipline is devotion. It's a sacred contract between the man you are and the man you are destined to be. The taste of integrity. Think back to the times you felt most alive. It wasn't during pleasure. It wasn't while you were resting. It was in the moments you surprised yourself. The times you did something you once thought you couldn't. That rush you felt wasn't mere pride, it was integrity. It was alignment. It was unity. And Jung would say that's no accident. The psyche longs for unity. It wants to integrate. But when you live fragmented, saying one thing while doing another, your subconscious rebels. You feel resistance not because you're lazy, but because your psyche is rejecting the fraud of who you're pretending to be. Do you see now? Your lack of discipline isn't the disease. It's the symptom. The real disease is a split soul. One side makes goals, the other breaks them. One side builds, the other avoids. Every day you live in that split, you don't just lose time. You deepen the fracture. Jung warned us, what you resist persists. The parts of yourself you exile don't die. They wait. They become your shadow. And your shadow isn't just the broken, wounded pieces of you. It's also the strongest, most disciplined, most ruthless, most ambitious parts you buried out of fear. Yes, fear of your own strength. The fear of strength. Let's be honest. What truly terrifies you isn't failure. What terrifies you is success. Because if you actually commit, if you actually become disciplined, then you have no one left to blame. You can't hide behind potential anymore. You'll have to become proof. And proof is terrifying, because once you are living evidence of what you're capable of, there's no turning back. You can't escape destiny anymore. You're either rising or you're dying, and the world will see it. But here's the irony, you're already dying. Every time you betray your own schedule, every time you abandon your priorities, every time you hit snooze, scroll past your promise, choose cheap dopamine over earned respect, you carve away a piece of your soul. You don't feel exhausted because of work. You feel exhausted because of guilt. Deep down, you know this isn't who you're meant to be. Let me put it to you clearly. Discipline isn't something you add to life. It's your soul's immune system. It protects you from decay, from regret, from becoming a man who gains everything but loses himself. The exiled archetype. Somewhere along your path, discipline was punished in you. Do you remember the first time? Maybe you spoke up and were silenced. Maybe you built something with pride only to have someone mock it. Maybe you worked hard at something, only to watch another person tear it down. That's how the fracture begins. Not from laziness, but from pain. The disciplined part of you, the part that wanted structure, focus, order, was also the most vulnerable. Discipline requires belief. It requires faith in your own power. And when that faith was shattered, your disciplined self went into hiding. This is what Jung meant by the repression of the noble archetypes, the king, the warrior, the architect. The part of you designed to lead, to build, to conquer time. That part didn't die. It was exiled. Now, when you try to change, when you try a new habit, a morning routine, a workout schedule, you're not starting from zero. You're confronting every ghost of defeat, every voice that once told you, you never finish what you start. You're not that kind of person. You'll never change. Unless you see this for what it is, you'll keep sabotaging yourself. Not because you want to fail, but because a deeper part of you still believes you must. The two men within. Jung left us with a truth that's hard to swallow. Your outer failures are rarely about effort. They're about identity. You can't outwork a self-image that contradicts the very thing you're trying to become. Imagine two men inside you. The first wants structure, legacy, power. He is calm, focused, sovereign. He keeps his word even when no one is watching. The second craves ease, comfort, disappearance. He avoids risk, avoids pain, avoids intensity. He wants warmth, not victory. These two men are not enemies. They are you, split in half. And until you stop trying to kill one of them, you will never be whole. The lazy version of you isn't trying to ruin your life. He's trying to protect you, from pain, from disappointment, from the sting of being laughed at. He was born to shield you when you were too young to handle the weight. But now, he doesn't belong on the throne. The return of the king. Discipline is not a war. It is a return. A return to the throne you abandoned. A return to the center of your psyche where the king archetype waits, not to dominate, but to stabilize. When a man reclaims his inner king, he stops performing for the world. He stops chasing permission. He begins to order his life, not for applause, but to reflect the hierarchy restored inside him. Discipline, at its essence, is psychological architecture. It is the external reflection of internal order. And when a man lacks it, he doesn't just lose productivity, he loses himself. That's why undisciplined men feel shame even when no one is watching. It's not about the tasks they failed to complete. It's about the fear of who they're becoming. This is the fracture of discipline. This is why you've failed so many times. Not because you're lazy, but because you've been divided. And the first step in reclaiming yourself is forgiveness. Because you cannot rise into discipline until you forgive the years you've lost. You're not broken. You're not weak. You simply forgot who you were. But now we descend deeper. Because the story doesn't end with fracture. Carl Jung believed every man must eventually confront his shadow, the parts of himself that were abandoned, suppressed, misunderstood. And here's the paradox. Those very parts you reject are the ones holding the keys to your transformation. The shadow isn't just darkness. When most people hear shadow, they think of hidden vices, destructive urges, forbidden desires. And yes, those are there. But Jung was clear. The shadow is not only the broken or shameful parts of you. It also contains your greatness, your discipline, your ambition, your strength. Why? Because these parts were too heavy for you to carry when you were younger. They were punished, mocked, or silenced. And so you buried them. But they didn't die. They became shadows. That's why every time you try to change, every time you try to rise, you feel this invisible resistance. It isn't because you're weak. It's because you're confronting the shadow of your own potential. The version of you that remembers every broken promise, every time you were told you'd never follow through. Identity. The battlefield of discipline. Here's a truth you need to write on your heart. You cannot outwork identity. No matter how many habits you stack, no matter how many planners you buy, no matter how many motivational videos you consume, you will always return to the man you believe yourself to be. And if that self-image is fractured, if it says, "I'm the guy who never follows through," then that's where you'll end up, no matter how strong your effort. This is why affirmations and hype often fail. They scream over the fracture, but they never heal it. To change your behavior, you must change your relationship with yourself. Not with force. Not with punishment. But with integration. The two voices. Let's revisit those two men inside you. One is sovereign. He is calm, structured, powerful. He keeps his word even in silence. He doesn't need applause, because his strength comes from within. The other seeks comfort, ease, disappearance. He avoids risk and intensity. He craves warmth, not victory. Most men try to kill this second self. They call him lazy. They curse him, suppress him, try to bury him deeper. But Jung warned us, what you resist persists. That lazy self isn't your enemy. He's a protector. He was born to shield you from pain, mockery, disappointment, rejection. When you see him not as an enemy but as an old guardian, everything changes. A conversation with the self. Imagine sitting across from that part of you, the part that scrolls endlessly, that sleeps in, that sabotages routines. What would you say to him? More importantly, what would he say to you? If you asked him, "Why do you keep ruining my life?" he would answer, "I'm not ruining it. I'm protecting you." Protecting you from what? From the sting of failure. From the humiliation of trying and falling short. From the loneliness of walking a harder path. Do you see the tragedy? The undisciplined part of you isn't evil. He's loyal. Misguided, yes, but loyal. So stop declaring war on him. Instead, thank him. Honor him. Tell him, "You kept me safe when I couldn't handle the weight. But I don't need you on the throne anymore." This is integration. The king archetype. Jung spoke of archetypes, patterns of the human psyche that appear across cultures, across time. Among them is the king. The king is order, stability, vision. The king is not a tyrant, not a despot. The king brings structure to chaos and safety to the land. Inside you, the king archetype waits. He is the disciplined self. The one who wakes not for applause, but because it is his duty. The one who organizes life not for vanity, but because order is sacred. Every man must eventually meet his inner king. And until he does, life feels scattered, chaotic, meaningless. Because discipline isn't just about tasks, it's about sovereignty. Without discipline, you don't just lose time. You lose the throne. You become a servant to impulses, to distractions, to whatever noise is loudest in the moment. Psychological architecture. Think of discipline as architecture. Your routines, your habits, your daily decisions. They are the bricks. And the building they create is your identity. If your habits are scattered, your identity is unstable. If your actions are aligned, your identity is solid. This is why undisciplined men feel shame even in private. Because deep down, the soul knows the house is collapsing. It isn't about productivity. It's about survival. But here's where many men stumble. When they realize the years lost, the mornings wasted, the promises broken, they turn discipline into punishment. They whip themselves with regret, believing that pain will force them into change. But punishment never leads to sovereignty. Punishment keeps you in the same cycle of shame. So listen carefully. You cannot fully reclaim discipline until you forgive yourself for the years you lost. This isn't weakness. This is maturity. The immature man says, "I'm broken. I must be fixed." The mature man says, "I am whole. I must be remembered." You were never broken. You only forgot. And every time you choose order over chaos, presence over distraction, action over hesitation, you're not becoming someone new. You're returning to who you've always been. Individuation. The great work. Jung believed the greatest task of life isn't success. It isn't wealth. It isn't even happiness. It's individuation. Becoming whole. Becoming real. Integrating the fractured parts of yourself into a living unity. Discipline is not the end goal. It's the pathway. It's how you prove to your unconscious that you are safe, that you are capable, that the king has returned to the throne. Without discipline, you drift. With it, you unite. The declaration versus reaction. So let me ask you, what would your life look like if you stopped living as a reaction and started living as a declaration? A reaction says, "I'll see how I feel today." A declaration says, "This is who I am. This is what I do." Reactions come from impulse. Declarations come from sovereignty. And this is where discipline shifts from struggle to rhythm. From punishment to power. Discipline as ritual. At the highest level, discipline is not about force. It's not about willpower. It's ritual. A sacred rhythm between you and the future you've sworn to build. You wake not because you must, but because you get to meet your oath again. You train not to punish yourself, but to remember yourself. You eat clean not for vanity, but because your body is the temple of your resolve. Everything begins to echo your truth. And one day, the man you once dreamed of becoming is no longer a vision. He's your reflection, grieving the old self. But here's a truth few people tell you. To rise, you must grieve. The undisciplined self, the man who broke promises, who scrolled endlessly, who numbed himself, he was doing his best. He kept you safe. He carried you here. You don't kill him with shame. You bury him with honor. You say, "Thank you. But your time is done." And when you grieve that self, you free the energy you've been using to pretend. And that energy is what builds. Building the new house. With that reclaimed energy, you build mornings of clarity, not chaos. You build routines that root you even when you don't feel like it. You build a schedule that doesn't trap you, but liberates you. Order is not your enemy. Order is your armor. And the more chaotic the world becomes, the more valuable a calm, structured man is. This is the man who others look to in storms. The man who doesn't waver when the world shakes. The man whose very presence is discipline. The quiet power. Remember this, real discipline doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It walks quietly, daily, like a man who finally remembers what he came here to do. You don't need another reason. You don't need to feel ready. You are already worthy of discipline. Because discipline isn't something outside you. It's the return of the king. The restoration of sovereignty. And once you reclaim it, you will never avoid discipline again. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because you'll finally know the peace of being whole. We've walked through fracture. We've walked through integration. Now comes the hardest truth of all. Time. Because discipline isn't just about order. It's about mortality. It's about the terrifying fact that you are running out of days. The clock that doesn't stop. Every morning you wake up, a clock you cannot see ticks forward. You cannot rewind it. You cannot pause it. You can deny it. Distract yourself from it. Pretend it isn't there. But the clock doesn't care. Discipline is how you stop wasting hours you can never earn back. This is why the undisciplined life feels hollow, no matter how pleasurable it looks. Because on some deep, unconscious level, the soul knows, you are bleeding time. And here is the cruelest twist. Most men only realize this when it's too late. When their hands shake, when their strength fades, when the mirror no longer shows the man they imagined they'd become. But you still have time. The weight of regret. Regret is heavier than discipline will ever be. You may think discipline costs too much, the early mornings, the training, the study, the routines. But those costs are pennies compared to the crushing debt of regret. Regret shows up in the final chapters of life. It whispers, "You could have been more." And that whisper echoes louder than any applause you ever received. The disciplined man avoids that fate. Not because he was perfect, not because he never stumbled, but because he used his hours with intention. Death as a teacher. Carl Jung often spoke of death not as an ending, but as a guide. When you confront death, not in panic, but in clarity, you begin to see what truly matters. Ask yourself, if you died today, would you die complete? Or would you die carrying unfinished vows, untaken paths, words you meant to speak but swallowed instead? Discipline forces you to face this question daily. Every rep, every page, every routine becomes an act of defiance against oblivion. Not because you're afraid of death, but because you respect life. If the king represents order, the warrior represents action. And discipline awakens the warrior inside you. But not the reckless warrior who swings wildly at everything. No, the true warrior is precise, focused, relentless. He knows death is coming. And that knowledge doesn't paralyze him. It sharpens him. Every action is a strike against chaos. Every morning routine is a sharpened blade. Every fulfilled promise is a victory in a war most men lose quietly. Discipline and legacy. One day, your name will be spoken for the last time. One day, the people who loved you most will close their eyes and struggle to remember the sound of your voice. That's the destiny of every man. But legacy, the echo of discipline, outlives you. Your children, your students, your community, even strangers who never met you, will walk differently because you chose discipline. Legacy is not carved in stone. It's carved in habits, in choices, in the silent integrity of a man who refused to betray himself. The lie of tomorrow. The undisciplined man worships tomorrow. I'll start tomorrow. I'll commit tomorrow. I'll change tomorrow. But tomorrow is a liar. Tomorrow is a thief. Tomorrow is how men waste their entire lives while convincing themselves they're not wasting anything at all. Discipline belongs to today, to this hour, to this moment. And once you anchor your discipline in the present, you rip tomorrow's lie apart. Freedom through discipline. Here's the paradox. The man who avoids discipline thinks he's free. No rules. No routines. No structure. But in reality, he is enslaved by distraction, by impulse, by weakness. The disciplined man looks rigid from the outside, bound by rules, schedules, habits. But he is free. Free from regret. Free from chaos. Free from the chains of what if. Discipline is not a prison. Discipline is the key. The mirror test. At the end of it all, strip away the noise, the applause, the judgment, and there is only one test that matters. Can you look in the mirror and respect the man staring back at you? Not admire him. Not glorify him. Not worship him. Simply respect him. That respect cannot be bought. It cannot be gifted. It cannot be faked. It is earned, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. And discipline is the mortar that binds those bricks into a man you can respect. Discipline as a spiritual act. In the modern world, discipline is framed as productivity, optimization, efficiency. But at its core, discipline is spiritual. It is how you tell life, I honor you. I will not waste you. Every time you resist the urge to betray yourself, every time you choose order over chaos, you are making a sacred declaration. I was given this life, and I will not squander it. Becoming the elder. There is one more archetype Jung spoke of, the wise old man, the elder. He is not just intelligent. He is integrated. He has lived through the shadow, the king, the warrior, and now he carries wisdom. If you live without discipline, you will grow old but never become an elder. You will simply become an older child, bitter and regretful. But if you live with discipline, you will carry wisdom that younger men will crave. Your very presence will teach them, not because of what you say, but because of who you are. Discipline matures you into the man others look to when storms come. So where does this leave us? You began fractured. Discipline was exiled, punished, misunderstood. You stumbled through shame, through resistance, through cycles of false starts. Then you saw the truth. The shadow was never your enemy. Integration revealed the king within. Ritual replaced punishment. Sovereignty replaced shame. And now, you confront the deepest truth. Time is short, death is certain, but discipline transforms those realities into fuel for meaning. When you finally understand this, discipline is no longer something you try to do. It is who you are. The last word. One day, you will take your last breath. The question is not whether that day will come. The question is this: when it does, will you have lived as a servant to impulse, or as a sovereign of your own existence? Discipline is the difference. And once you reclaim it, you will never avoid it again. Not because it is easy, not because it is glamorous, but because it is the only way to honor the short, fragile, sacred gift of life you were given.